Max Verstappen uses all of his skill and talent to fend off a rampant Lando Norris, securing the Dutchman a third consecutive victory in the Spanish Grand Prix. From RacingNews365.com, my name is Nick Golding and I'm joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, the rain never arrived. Verstappen was his dominant self and proved yet again that when times get tough, he is still the number one.
Yeah, never trust a weather forecast, Nick, that's for certain. Anybody who watched the Saturday evening F1 update will know that I said, the rain is coming, folks. The forecast said it was coming, that it was going to pour down overnight, that it was possibility that we're going to have showers all the way up to the race start. Pulled back the curtains this morning, dry as a bone. Got to the circuit, dry as a bone. Not a drop fell over the circuit, the Catalonia, that's for sure. And in the end, we got not so much a routine Max Verstappen victory. It was far from that, that's for certain. He had to work for it. But nevertheless, we got a 61st career F1 victory for Max Verstappen. And him opening the gap again in the Drivers' Championship.
And I think what we saw as well is how much this win meant to him. He knew coming into this weekend that actually McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari are right on Red Bull's heels. Verstappen, after jumping out of his car, was straight over to his team, jumping over the Parc Fermé fencing, something we don't see too often. But obviously, you know, the big point in this race was the start. That's what proved to be crucial. Lando Norris was bitterly disappointed to finish second. You know, knew he had a massive chance to win, but lost it through wheel spin in his second phase of the start.
Yeah, just getting back to Max's response initially, I'll address that. Drivers are often asked, would you rather win? I know Max has been asked pointedly on a couple of occasions, would you rather win comfortably 25, 30, 35 seconds, whatever? We know we've seen him put together those kind of victories. Or would you rather win in the kind of fashion that he did today, where, as I say, he really had to work for it? And I think there are times, like we saw with his reaction, where it means so much to a driver where they know they've had to perform, when they've had to rely on their team to give them that strategic platform as well to deliver the kind of victory that we saw today. And as you say, the start in particular, first of all, and then that first stint was crucial to Max's victory. As we saw, as we know, Lando was on pole, Max alongside him at the front row. Long run down to turn one here at Barcelona's Circuit de Catalunya. And as you say, Lando let it get away from him at that start. Second phase wheel spin really cost him off the line. Tried to push Max over to one side. Max had to dip the right-hand wheels onto the grass at one stage to try and, to ensure that he could try and get past Lando. He did enough coming off that. Lando gave a little bit of ground back because he realised where he was going with that move. Gave the pretty much the inside line back going into turn one, and that got that move done. But of course, on the outside, with those two dueling, George Russell passed them both. Slipstream Max, slipstream Lando, and then did a fantastic move around the outside of turn one. And he led for those first couple of laps. But then Max, having got second place, or having passed Lando, shall we say, and was in second place, chasing George, he made short work of getting past George Russell. That was another crucial moment. The third crucial moment that really played in Max's hands was how long it took Lando Norris to get past George Russell himself. Effectively, if you look at the way the race unfolded, Lando lost that 4 seconds in time compared to that across that first stint to eventually get past George. That 4 seconds proved crucial, because the winning margin, of course, was just over 2 seconds between Max and Lando. So what Lando did in the final stint, in that middle stint, in the final stint, was great. He managed to close the gap, and eventually he started closing back up. You could see the time gap coming down, but Max drove really aggressively in that final phase himself on those fading soft tyres to do enough to get the victory. And as I say, he's 61st. Lando knows this was one missed, that's for certain. And we've got to wait for that second career victory for him.
And of course, it does just show that very much now Red Bull and McLaren are arguably level pegging. Both Lando and Max driving exceptionally. For Lando, though, do you think this is a podium gained or a victory lost?
Absolutely. Yeah, simply because on the basis of what we've just talked about there, what happened with coming off the line, what happened in then failing to overtake George as quickly as Max did. Those two moments were the keys to eventually everything then unfolding across the course of the Grand Prix. Lando extended his first stint, went 6 laps longer than Max before he switched onto the medium tyres. And he did a great work in getting past, I think it was Carlos, then Lewis, then George, to really get back on the tail of Max Verstappen. And at that stage, it looked like he'd got a shot at the victory. He was forced into an earlier than what he probably would have hoped for second stop. In that particular phase of the race, Lando pitted 2 laps later than Max because he could see Max having switched back onto the soft tyres. McLaren could see just how quick Max was on that rubber. And so they had to bring in Lando a lot quicker than they probably would have wanted to try and limit the damage in terms of then the gap between them on track before Lando then had to start closing back up again. As I say, he got to with about 16 laps to go, if memory serves, he got to within about 5.5 seconds. He had put in a real good stint, drove really aggressively to start with on that third stint, having switched back onto the soft tyre. But then Max managed to hold that for a short while before Lando again started to close in towards the end of the race, when unfortunately there just wasn't enough laps for him to make any kind or get anywhere close to Max to try and claim a victory. But yes, as you say, definitely podium gained, victory lost.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there, obviously, it was Russell who led on the exit of the first corner, but ultimately didn't quite have the pace for the podium. He went onto the hard tyre for his final stint, which was really, the big, the podium killer for him almost. It meant that Lewis Hamilton, who was on the soft tyre in his final stint, something that was very crucial, finally got back on the podium after 13 races, his 198th career podium in F1, which means if he finishes on the podium in Austria next weekend, he could do the 200 at Silverstone.
Wouldn't that be something? But what will the podium be? Will he get the podium in Austria? Well, first of all, will he get the podium in Silverstone? I asked Toto Wolff in his media briefing after the Grand Prix whether he now felt, given the rate of development of that W50, the upgrades that they have placed on that car consistently for a number of Grand Prix now, whether he felt a victory was in the offing sometime soon. Talked about being cautiously optimistic with regard to doing something like that, but he has not ruled it out, that's for certain. If Mercedes can continue, as I say, to add upgrades on that car, and they've got more coming, now that they're on the right trajectory, now that they know what they have to do with that car in terms of the development, then I think we could probably see them maybe just before the summer break be at the front, or should we say much closer to Red Bull and McLaren. Then we would have a 3-way fight for race wins, never mind pole positions. And of course, we still cannot rule out Ferrari. Just a word on them, this circuit really didn't quite play to their strengths, certainly not with that new upgrade package that they came with into this Grand Prix weekend. So they know they've got work to do to get that right. And I tell you what, Nick, Austria and Silverstone are going to be absolutely 2 cracking Grand Prix. If this was an indicator of anything to go by, because I think the field for those 2 Grand Prix is going to be so close between those 4 teams. But I should say, Lewis in the mix for that 200th podium at Silverstone. Now, as I say, that really would be something, a sight to see for all the British fans, that's for sure.
Of course. And actually, when we look at Austria, the lap times are always so close there because it's such a fast and short circuit. Just sticking with Ferrari for a second, obviously, a disappointing day for both Charles and Carlos, 5th and 6th in the end. They also had a very small coming together on lap 5, I believe it was, with a few words having been said after the race. It's After the disappointments of Canada, this isn't exactly the bounce back we were expecting to see from Ferrari.
No, and I think we were all anticipating that, especially, as I mentioned, the fact that it came into this Grand Prix weekend with a very considerable upgrade package. They brought, a massive update to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola just a few weeks ago. That performed well. There was no reason to suggest that this not similar, but another considerable upgrade package would not work well either. And coming out of it, there's still no reason to suggest that it won't go well in Austria and Silverstone. But nevertheless, as you say, this was a weekend of relative disappointment. 5th and 6th in qualifying, 5th and 6th in the Grand Prix, albeit the positions reversed, as Carlos qualified ahead of Charles, but we finished behind him on the racetrack. That was simply due to strategy. He, like George Russell, went for a hard tyre on the final stint, and it really didn't work for them, just like it really didn't work for George. And in the end, we saw just how close Charles came. One more lap more than likely, and he would likely have passed George for 4th place.
Definitely, and we'll talk more about Ferrari in the upcoming podcast. Just to quickly go through the top 10 before our final talking point, it was, of course, Max Verstappen on top with Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton completing the podium. George Russell in 4th, Leclerc and Sainz in 5th and 6th. Oscar Piastri in 7th with Sergio Perez in 8th before Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon completed the top 10 for Alpine. A brilliant job by Alpine, but Sergio Perez starting in P11, obviously, with his 3-place grid penalty, only made 3 places. He called his race a nightmare. You had Christian Horner saying that it was a confidence booster. It's such contradicting comments, and really, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I really don't quite understand what Christian was talking about. I really cannot understand how a 7th place finish in that car from where he started would be confidence boosting for him. He's going through a wretched period. We've discussed Checo Perez so much on these updates and our podcasts, and he's really got to start working it out for himself. He's tried so much. As he was in the simulator for a considerable period coming into this weekend, we know that, and things just are not working for him. So I can only guess Christian, in coming out with such a comment, is just trying to raise the morale a little bit of Checo. But if he himself is saying that this was a disastrous weekend on the back of a disastrous weekend in Canada, a disastrous weekend in Monaco, where does he go from here? And Red Bull have got to be wondering themselves now, where do we go here with him as well? Because it was only not so long ago that they gave him this new contract, a 1+1. So he's safe for 2025. And then they're going to look and review it across the course of 2025 to see whether they give him that +1 for 2026. Right now, he doesn't deserve to be in that seat for 2025. That would be my view on it, because he's not performing at the level you would expect, given that car with Max Verstappen at the wheel is still performing incredibly well, even though, yes, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren especially have caught right up to them. And obviously, as we discussed at the start, Max is now having to work a lot harder for his victories. But he still is in the lead car. He has still won a considerable chunk of Grand Prix this year. And he's won, the last 2 in Canada, which was a track that wasn't expected to suit the RB20. And he's gone well here, relative to the opposition, of course, but he's still come out with a victory. Whereas Checo Perez just cannot seem to work out how to get the best out of that car. And the team in working with him, quite obviously, cannot work out how to marry Checo to the RB20 to get the best out of that entire driver car package.
Yeah, that's definitely something else we'll discuss in the upcoming podcast, given that obviously the Austrian Grand Prix is Red Bull's home race, so a very significant weekend for them. Obviously, for those who are watching this video, be sure to let us know in the comment section any thoughts you have on the talking points me and Ian have discussed. Ian, get yourself home safely. This has been the Racing News 365 F1 update. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and me and Ian will see you later. Bye.
Take care, folks.